We are starting our learning of Gemarah Megillah, so we can make a siyum for Nathan Bricks and Naftali Falek ben Rav Tzvi Abba Halevi, which will take place this coming Sunday night, Monday, March 8th, March 9th, Sunday night. We will have a siyum, and we're learning Gemarah Megillah towards that end. We'll see if this format works. If this doesn't, we'll try a different format. The Gemarah starts on Beis Amud Aleph, page 2, and a quick note about that. The first Gemaras were printed by a Jewish family, Sansina family, in the late 1400s, but the Gemarah that we have, and its pagination follows that of Christian Hebrew book printers, Daniel Bamberg, B-O-M-B-E-R-G, Daniel Bamberg. And ostensibly, the reason that the Gemarah starts on Daf Beis is because Aleph, page 1, was reserved for the cover page. So, interestingly enough, all of the Gemaras in Talmud Babli start on Beis. However, all the Gemaras in Talmud Yerushalmi start on page Aleph. It's just a function of different pagination set about by the printers. The first Mishnah in Gemarah Megillah discusses when we're going to read the Megillah. You have to remember this was written at the time during the Gemarah, at this particular point in time. The world was slightly different than it is today, and there were many places where in these smaller villages, smaller towns, they didn't have people who were able to read the Megillah, so they read it on what they called the Day of Assembly. Ezra had set up that we should read in the Chumash every Monday and Thursday, so we shouldn't have 3 days going by without any Torah at all. So what they would do is if Purim fell on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, they would advance it or set it up earlier to Monday. If Purim came out on Friday, they would set it up to Thursday. So those are the days what they call the assembly, when the courts were in session, and there were more people there who were able to participate in reading the Megillah. One of the things that the Mishnah is going to teach us is that the earliest it can be is the 11th, and we'll go through the pagination and figure out why, and the latest is the 15th. This is part of the function of the wording in Gemarah Megillah at the end, where it talks about these days. So the Chazal expound these days to include the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Besides, today we read on the 14th and the 15th. Today we read the 14th all over, except in what we have, the walled cities, such as Yerushalayim, where it's read on the 15th. There are 3 parts to Purim. One is the reading of the Megillah. One is gifts to everybody's neighbor, and gifts to the poor. So those two take place on the 14th and the 15th respectively, while the reading of the Megillah can vary. So we'll start off right now. So the first Mishnah reads like this. Megillah Nikreis B'Yud Aleph. The Megillah is read on the 11th of Adar, on the 12th of Adar, or on the 13th of Adar, or the 14th, or the 15th. Not earlier than the 11th, not later than the 15th. The Gemarah explains, residents of cities that were surrounded by walls at the time of Yoshua ben Nun, they read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar. Residents of villages and large towns read the Megillah on the 14th of Adar, except that the residents of villages may at times advance, or move it up, may advance the date for reading the Megillah to the day of assembly. What is the day of assembly? As I indicated before, that would be respectively Monday and Thursday, because those are the days that the court would meet and other people would come into the small villages. Okay, said, how does this take place? If the 14th of Adar falls on a Monday, the Mishnah is going through explaining one by one. And it is depending upon when the 14th of Adar falls, which in our case today is Purim. Whenever that day would fall, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., depending on the day it would fall, the Mishnah is going to teach us when we would read the Megillah. So, Kesad, how does this work? If the 14th of Adar falls on a Monday, Kafarim, Vayaros, Gedolos, Korin, Bobayom, the residents of villages in large towns read the Megillah on that day, whatever day the 14th was. Umukafos Choma L'machar, and the residents of walled cities read it on the following day, meaning the 15th. Chaliyos Bashlishi over Revi, if the 14th of Adar falls on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, Kafarim Makdimim Liyom HaKnisa, the residents of villages advance their reading of the Megillah to the preceding day of assembly, Monday, and residents of large towns read on that day, either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending upon which was the 14th, and the residents of walled cities read on the following day, either Wednesday or Thursday. If the 14th of Adar, which is Purim, if it falls on a Thursday, the Kafarim Yaros Gedolos Korban Babayom, residents of villages and large towns read on that day, Umukafos Choma L'machar, and the residents of walled cities on the following day, Friday the 15th. Chaliyos Erev Shabbos, if the 14th falls on the eve of the Shabbos, Friday, the residents of villages advance the reading to the preceding day of assembly, Thursday the 13th, and the residents of large towns and walled cities read on that day, Friday the 14th. The Mishnah continues. Chaliyos b'Shabbos. We have to remember that at the time of the Gemarah, in the times of the Gemarah, Rosh Chodesh was said about by Beis, depending upon the coming forward of witnesses who gave testimony as to when they saw the formation of the new moon. So therefore, unlike today, the holidays can come out almost on any day. Today we have a fixed calendar set by Hillel, and the Purim can only come out on any one of 4 days, which would be Sunday, I think it's Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Anyway, Chaliyos b'Shabbos, if the 14th falls on the Shabbos, the residents of villages and large towns advance the reading and read the Megillah on the preceding day of assembly, Thursday the 12th, and the residents of walled cities read on the following day, Sunday the 15th. If the 14th falls on the day after Shabbos, Sunday, the residents of villages advance the reading to the previous day, to the preceding day of assembly, Thursday the 11th, and residents of large towns read on that day, Sunday the 14th, and the residents of walled cities read the following day, Monday the 15th. So it's a very simple and plain Mishnah, the first Mishnah. It goes on to discuss when I'm going to read the Megillah, and it does, as I said, it doesn't really pertain to us today, because today we don't have the situation that they had at that particular time. Also, we don't have a situation when Purim can come out on any one of 7 days. Gemarah. The Gemarah quotes the first segment of the Mishnah and seeks its scriptural source. This is a frequent study of the Gemarah. The structure of Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi is the same. A Mishnah is given. The Mishnah is basically a writing down of the oral law set by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And the reason he wrote down the oral law, because he felt that they had reached a stage in Jewish life where things were being forgotten. So he wrote that down. But both the Megillah, both the Mishnah, and the Gemaras were written in such a style that you really needed a teacher to go over with you and teach it to you. You can't just read a Mishnah and fully understand it. Many times it seems that there are words missing, and it's set up to teach us in such a way that we go through with a Rebbe. The reason for that is we have Torah Shebeksav. Torah that is written refers to our Torah that we know, Chamisha Torah. But there's another Torah, which is Torah Shebal Peh, okay, the oral law. And if you go through in the beginning, especially in the beginning of Pirkei Avos, it describes the passing down of all this information. So Moshe Rabbeinu was taught all of the Mishnayos and the Gemarah. He was taught all of that by Kadosh Baruch Hu, and he gave it over to Yeshua and Zekanim. And then if you follow through, as I said at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, it explains how this information was transferred. It was transferred from one generation to another generation, etc., until we reached a point where Rav Yehuda HaNasi codified the Mishnayos, and the 7th generation of Amoraim, which would be Rav Ashi and Ravina, they codified the Gemarah. So what the Gemarah frequently does is as follows. Once we finish a Mishnah, the Gemarah now is going to go through and find the source of the Mishnah. First of all, according to which Tana, which teacher, the rabbis of the Mishnah are called Tanaim. The rabbis of the Gemarah are called Amoraim. So we want to find out which Tana, which teacher is responsible for a particular Mishnah, and we also frequently want to find out what its source is. Where does it come from? Is it coming from Torah Shebekasav? Is it coming from what we call an asmachta, which is a reference frequently from the prophets? In any case, we want to investigate this a little bit further. So the Gemarah opens up, and we're still on Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemarah opens up and says like this. The Gemarah quotes the first segment of the Mishnah and seeks its scriptural source. The megilla is read on the 11th of Adar or on the 12th or 13th. From where in Scripture do we know these dates? The verse mentions only the 14th and 15th of Adar as dates for the celebration of Purim. This sentence that the verse mentions, what verse is this? It's talking about the verse in the Megillah itself. So if you go to the 9th parak, where at the very end, it talks about the fact that it uses the words Kol Hayomim Ha'eleh. So the Chazal, our sages, learn out from this phrase that there is more than just 2 days. It's not just the 14th and the 15th, but there are additional days. Okay? The Gemarah rejects the premise of the question. From where do we know this? The Gemarah says, why do you ask that question? This is not a scriptural decree, but rather, as we intend to state below, the Chachamim were lenient with regard to villages and allowed their residents to advance their reading to the preceding day of assembly, so that they will be available on the 14th of Adar to provide water and food for the Purim feasts of their brethren who reside in the towns. So again, first of all, we're talking at a time when there was a much more type of an agricultural community, and it was the small villages which supplied as I just read, supplied the food and everything else for the big towns. The Gemarah explains the intent of its original question. Anan hachi ka'amrinan. This is what we meant to ask. Let's see. All of the dates listed in the Mishnah must have originally been established by the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was called in English the Men of the Great Assembly, but the Sanhedrin was 70 elders, and this was, in a matter of speaking, the Supreme Court. This was the highest court that we had. There were 3 courts. There was a court of 3 people, a court of 23 people, and a court of 71 people. And the court of 71 people is called Sanhedrin. We also have, which we're going to come to, which you will see, which we'll come to soon, the concept that no Beis Din, no court can abrogate or change the ruling of a previous court unless it is greater than the previous court, either in number or in, for lack of a better word, chachma. So basically, today, sometimes we ask the question, how come we're still doing this? And the answer is because we're not in a position to overturn rulings of previous court systems, or previous rabbinical decrees. So the Gemarah, again, going back, the Gemarah explains the intent of its original question. This is what we had meant to ask. Let's see. All the dates listed in the Mishnah must have originally been established by the Sanhedrin. Because if you should think that the men of the Sanhedrin established the 14th and 15th of Adar as the only dates for the reading of the Megillah, how could the rabbis of a later generation come and say that one may read the Megillah earlier and thereby abrogate an enactment passed by the men of the Great Assembly? Because we learned in a Mishnah, another Mishnah somewhere else, one court cannot override the rulings of another court unless it is superior to the other court in wisdom and in numbers. It is obvious, therefore, that the Sanhedrin must have established all the dates listed in the Mishnah. That being the case, the Megillah must contain some allusion to the dates of the 11th, 12th, and 13th of Adar. Thus, the intent of our original question was, where are these dates alluded to in the Megillah itself? So the Gemarah provides the scriptural source. The Gemara now is going to look inside the Megillah, inside Megillah's Esther, and we're going to examine these words. Rav Shimon bar Abba said in the name of Rav Yochanan, the verse states, to establish these days of Purim in their times. And we're going to focus on the words, these days. So these days, those two words, these days, seem to be superfluous. We don't need them. Why are you telling me these days? You already told me the 14th and the 15th. If you read the Megillah, it'll tell you on the 14th and the 15th. Why the 14th and the 15th? 14th was their victory, but the 15th was the victory in Shushan. So therefore we have 2 days. So now we have a verse, so the wording in the Megillah says, these days. So this seemingly unnecessary term, their times, these days, teaches that many dates were designated for them, not just the 14th and 15th of Adar. The Gemarah was going to challenge this derivation. But this term is required for the basic meaning of the text itself. It refers back to the dates of the 14th and 15th of Adar previously mentioned in the text, to teach that the Megillah is read on those dates. The Gemarah counters, if so, that it merely refers to dates that were already mentioned, let the verse say time. That would suffice as a reference to whatever was mentioned previously. What is indicated by the use of the plural form, their times? It evidently conveys that many times were established for reading the Megillah, and not only the previously mentioned dates of the 14th and 15th. The Gemarah continues to challenge the derivation, but the plural form is still required to teach that the time for walled cities is unlike the time for unwalled cities. Walled and unwalled cities have 2 distinct times for reading the Megillah. This we know is in practice today, because in the city of Yerushalayim, they read the Megillah on the 15th. If you go to Ranana or other places, they read the Megillah, Netanya and Ranana, other places, they read the Megillah on the 14th. So the Gemarah counters, if so, that it teaches only that walled and unwalled cities have 2 distinct times, let the verse say their time. That would suffice to imply that walled and unwalled cities are treated as distinct groups in regard to this law. What is conveyed by the use of the term their times? Learn from this that all the above teachings may be derived from this expression. Having established that the verse provides for additional dates for the reading of the Megillah, the Gemarah questions how we know that these additional dates are limited to the ones listed in the Mishnah. Say that the verse includes a large number of dates, not just 11, 12, 13. The Gemarah answers, the additional days derived from the verse use of the term their times are similar to the days derived from the more basic form their time. Just as the basic form their time denotes 2 days, the 14th and the 15th, so too the term their times denotes 2 days. This is also something that we're going to see frequently in the Gemarah. When we learn, what the Gemarah is going to do is as follows. The Gemarah is going to find 2 sentences. In one sentence, there's a series of words, and we interpret sentence 1 this way. We find another sentence somewhere else that has a few of the similar words in sentence 2 that are in sentence 1. What the rabbis do is they are able to learn one set of rules from sentence 1 onto sentence 2, and therefore they extrapolate and they're able to add more information. So, as I just said, the additional days derived from the verse's use of the term their times are similar to the days derived from the more basic form their time. Just as the basic form their time denotes 2 days, meaning the 14th and the 15th, so too the term their times denotes 2 days. The Gemarah asks, but one could say that the 2 extra days are the 12th and the 13th. How do we know that the 11th is also included? The Gemarah answered that 2 days must be the 11th and 12th because the 13th does not require a special scriptural source. It is, as Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak said elsewhere, the 13th day of Adar was the time when all the Jews assembled to wage war against their enemies, and therefore no scriptural derivation is needed to include it, the 13th, as a day on which the Megillah is read, for it was on that day, the 13th, that the main miracle of Purim occurred. Here too the same principle may be applied. Since the 13th day of Adar was the time when all the Jews assembled to wage war against their enemies, no scriptural derivation is required to include as the day on which the Megillah is read. Therefore, the 2 extra days derived from the verse must be the 11th and 12th, for the 13th is included without a specific verse. Still, the Gemarah asks, but one could say that the 2 extra days derived from the verse on the 16th and the 17th, not 11 and 12. The Gemarah answers, it is written in the Megillah, and it shall not pass. The words are velo ya'avor. We cannot go over, we cannot pass. This teaches that the reading of the Megillah cannot take place later than the times prescribed in the verse, the 14th and the 15th. The Gemarah offers a different scriptural source for the Mishnah's ruling that the Megillah may be read even on the 11th, 12th, and 13th of Adar. And Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani said, the verse states, like the days on which the Jews rested, meaning the 14th and the 15th, by adding like, the verse implies a reference to other days which are like the days mentioned in the verse, like the 14th and 15th, but not identical to them. The intent is to include 2 extra days, namely the 11th and the 12th, for the reading of the Megillah. The Gemarah asks, but one could say that the verse's intent is to include the 12th and 13th. What basis is there for assuming that the 2 extra days are the 11th and 12th? The Gemarah answers that the 2 extra days must be the 11th and 12th because the 13th does not require a scriptural source, as I indicated earlier. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak said the 13th of Adar was the time when all the Jews assembled to wage war against their enemies. Therefore, no scriptural derivation is required to include as a day on which the Megillah may be read, for it was on that day that the main miracle occurred. Still, the Gemarah asks, but one could say that the 2 extra days derived from the verse are the 16th and 17th, and the Gemarah answers again, it's written, you shall not pass. This teaches that the reading of the Megillah cannot take place later than the times prescribed in the verse, the 14th and the 15th. We pretty much conclude Daf Beis Amud Aleph. So normally when we talk about a daf, we talk about a folio. A folio is both sides of the pages. So when we refer to any particular daf, we always include in that daf the word Amud Aleph or Amud Beis. So if I would tell you, look at daf Yud Ches, look at the 18th folio page, okay, well, which side of it? Is it the front side or the back side? So the answer is I have Amud Aleph and Amud Beis. So we've concluded the first learning session of Gemarah Megillah for the eventual siyum for my dear brother-in-law Rav Nathan. If anybody has any comment, if we want to, we can continue this format. If anybody would like to suggest a different format, please do so. I thank you very much.